Rain had a way of mooting everything, street sounds, the growl of engines, even pain. Tonight, it fell in sheets over the cracked asphalt of an old highway running along the edge of town. The streetlights flickered, yellow and half-dead, throwing trembling shadows across the small diner that sat alone under the storm. Inside, the smell of coffee and burnt toast clung to the air. It was past midnight, and the place was nearly empty. A waitress named Lena moved slowly between tables, her steps soft, her eyes distant. She was in her late 20s, with auburn hair tied back under a frayed headband and an expression that carried both beauty and fatigue. The kind of woman who looked like she'd fought 1,000 quiet battles, most of which she never told anyone about. The only sound came from the old radio on the counter, playing an Elvis tune too faint to lift the gloom. The diner door creaked each time the wind hit it, but no one came in. Then at 12:43 a.m., the engines broke the silence. 4 motorcycles rolled into the parking lot, their headlights slicing through the rain. They came in a staggered formation, one black Harley in the lead, followed by a chrome Triumph, a dark red Indian, and an old Ducati with custom flames. The thunder of their arrival rattled the windows. Inside, Lena looked up. She'd seen bikers before. The diner sat on a long stretch between 2 states, a known stop for men who lived more on the road than in their homes. But something about this group made her pulse quicken. They parked in perfect alignment, rain dripping off their jackets as they dismounted. The leader, tall, broad-shouldered, and with a face carved from stone, removed his helmet. His hair was black streaked with silver, tied back low. The name stitched onto his vest read Crow. Behind him the others followed. Jax with a scar cutting down his cheek, Diesel, who looked like he could bend a crowbar with his hands, and Finn, the youngest, barely out of his 20s, his eyes scanning the place with restless energy. When they entered the diner, the bell above the door gave a half-hearted ring. Lena forced a polite smile. "Sit anywhere you like." Crow nodded once. His voice was deep when he finally spoke. "Coffee, 4 cups, black." She turned to fill the order, but she could feel their eyes follow her, especially Finn's, curious and lingering. The men spoke in low tones, the kind of talk that carried weight but no laughter. Something about their silence felt heavier than the rain outside. Lena placed the cups on their table. "You boys heading somewhere?" she asked, just to break the air. Jax looked up first, his expression unreadable. "Nowhere that matters." Diesel gave a faint smirk. "Nowhere anyone needs to know about." Crow didn't say a word. He just lifted his cup, his eyes fixed on Lena as if trying to read something behind her face. She pretended not to notice, returning to the counter, but her hands shook slightly as she wiped it down. They weren't like the loud, careless bikers who sometimes stopped by. These men carried something cold with them, something that had already been decided long before they entered. Outside, a police siren wailed somewhere distant, then faded again. At 1:07 a.m., another car pulled into the lot, a small silver sedan. The engine coughed and went still. Lena's heart dropped the moment she saw it. She knew that car. She knew who it belonged to. A man stepped out, slamming the door hard enough to make the bikers glance up. He was tall, clean-cut, wearing a soaked leather jacket and a face full of control. His name was Eric, Lena's husband, or technically her husband for now. He pushed through the diner door with the kind of confidence that came from knowing how to hurt quietly. His eyes landed on Lena, and a twisted smile followed. "There you are." The bikers went still. Lena froze where she stood, her rag hanging limp in her hand. "You left the house without your phone," Eric said, his tone smooth but sharp. "Had me worried sick." Crow looked at Lena. Her shoulders had tensed, her mouth tightening like she was swallowing a scream. "Didn't mean to," she said softly. Eric walked closer, voice lowering. "You didn't mean to, or you didn't want to." The air changed. Diesel's knuckles brushed the table edge. Jax's jaw tightened. Finn stopped stirring his coffee. Crow's eyes flicked from Eric to Lena. Something wasn't right. Eric leaned across the counter, his voice now a hiss. You think I don't see how you talk to men when I'm not around? Lena stepped back, her back hitting the counter. Eric, please. Before she could finish, Eric's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. It wasn't a slap. It wasn't loud, but it was the kind of grip that spoke of history, of repetition. The sound of a chair scraping the floor cut through the diner. Diesel stood. Let go of her. Eric turned his head slowly, like someone being interrupted in the middle of a ritual. This is none of your business. It became our business, Jax muttered, the moment your hand landed on her. Eric gave a short, humorless laugh. You bikers think you're heroes, huh? Knights in leather jackets. I've seen your kind, living off gas stations and trouble. Crow's voice came next, low and even. Let her go. Eric looked at him, smirked, and released her wrist, but not before whispering, We'll finish this at home. Then he walked out, slamming the door hard enough to make the bell jingle violently. Lena stood still, her breath shallow. Finn approached first, speaking gently, You okay? She nodded, but her eyes were glassy. He's just angry, it's fine. Diesel frowned, doesn't look fine. Crow said nothing. He just watched her, watched the way she rubbed her wrist, the faint outline of bruises that were already there, some old, some new. After a long silence, he finally asked, You got somewhere safe to go tonight? She hesitated, then whispered, No. He nodded once, slow, You do now. The rain was relentless when the diner finally closed. Lena turned the open sign to closed and locked the door. The bikers were still there, waiting. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly, clutching her worn jacket. Crow shrugged slightly, because nobody else will. They followed her to the parking lot, helping her cover her hair with a spare hoodie as she stepped into the storm. Her car wouldn't start. Eric had taken the keys. Ride with us, Crow said simply. She hesitated, eyes darting toward the road. If he sees me. Then he'll see, Diesel interrupted. And maybe it's time he saw what happens when someone like him crosses the wrong people. The thunder cracked. Lena looked at the four of them, their presence, their wordless certainty. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. Okay, she said softly. Crow handed her his spare helmet. You ride with me. As the engines roared back to life, Lena climbed onto the back of Crow's Harley. The machine vibrated beneath her, power surging through her spine. When they took off into the storm, the diner lights disappeared behind them, swallowed by rain and night. They reached an abandoned barn outside the city, the kind of place used for temporary shelter. The wind howled through the boards, and the rain drummed the tin roof like restless fingers. Diesel and Jax unpacked dry blankets and a small heater from their bikes. Finn found some canned food and set it by the wall. Crow took off his jacket, hung it on a hook, and finally looked at Lena. You don't have to talk, he said, but if you want us to help, we need to know who we're up against. Lena hesitated, then sat down slowly. Her voice was fragile when she began. Eric used to be good, or maybe I thought he was. He was charming when we met, quiet, smart, a little intense. I didn't see what was coming. The first time he hit me, he cried for an hour after. I thought it was a mistake. Then it happened again. Then again. She stared at the floor, her voice trembling. I kept hiding it from my sister, from work, from everyone. Tonight he found a message on my phone, a job offer in another state. I wanted to leave. He said if I ever tried, he'd make sure no one found me again. The bikers were silent. Even Finn had stopped fidgeting. Crow finally said, You did right leaving tonight. Lena gave a hollow laugh. He'll find me, he always does. Crow's expression hardened. Not this time. He turned to Jax. You still got that contact in the sheriff's office? Jax nodded. Yeah, but he's an hour away. Good, Crow said. We'll get her there by morning, she'll be safe. But the plan wouldn't last long. By 3:00 a.m., headlights appeared in the distance. The roar of an approaching engine cut through the rain. Finn peered through a crack in the boards. Someone's coming. Crow motioned for silence. He moved toward the door, pistol drawn but held low. Then came the sound that made everyone tense, the crunch of boots on gravel. Crow opened the door halfway, rain spraying in. It was Eric. His hair was plastered to his face, eyes wild with fury. "Where is she?" he shouted into the storm. Behind Crow, Lena gasped softly. Crow stepped forward. "Go home, man." Eric sneered. "You think you can hide her from me? You have no idea who I am." Diesel stepped up beside Crow. "We don't care who you are." Eric reached inside his jacket, and before anyone could react, Crow had him pinned against the wooden wall, one arm twisted behind his back. "Don't," Crow warned. "Don't make this worse." Eric laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You think you're saving her. She doesn't belong with people like you." Lena stepped forward then, her voice trembling but strong. "You're right. I don't belong with you anymore." For a brief moment, Eric looked stunned. Then his eyes filled with something darker than anger, fear. Crow released him, stepping back. "Get in your car and leave." Eric glared at them all, then finally turned and stalked off into the storm. His car roared to life, spinning gravel as it disappeared down the road. Silence hung heavy for a long while. Finn finally muttered, "He'll be back." Crow nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's why we don't sleep tonight." Lena sat alone by the heater, hugging her knees. Crow approached, setting a mug of coffee beside her. "You handled that well," he said. She gave a faint smile. "I didn't handle anything, you did." He looked at her, his voice quiet. "You stood your ground, that's more than most." She met his eyes, and for a heartbeat, something unspoken passed between them, something raw, fragile, and new. Outside, the storm began to calm. Inside, Lena whispered softly, "Thank you." Crow nodded once, then turned back to the others. "Get some rest in shifts," he ordered. "We move at dawn." As he walked away, Lena watched him. This stranger who had appeared out of nowhere, who didn't ask for anything in return, who seemed to carry his own ghosts, yet still found room to fight for someone else. For the first time in years, she didn't feel trapped. She felt the faintest spark of safety, maybe even hope. But dawn would bring something none of them expected. Because Eric wasn't the only one looking for her. And the truth behind Crow's silence, the thing that made even his men afraid to question him, was about to come to light. And it would begin the moment Lena whispered, hours later under her breath, "End it fast." Crow heard the words, and what happened next would leave them all frozen in silence. The rain finally stopped by dawn, leaving the fields outside the old barn soaked and steaming. Thin mist curled across the grass, and the world looked washed clean, though the people inside hadn't slept enough to feel any kind of peace. Crow stood outside near his Harley, watching the horizon. He hadn't spoken much since the confrontation with Eric. His jaw was tight, his eyes red from exhaustion, but his mind was still sharp, calculating every move. Behind him, Lena stepped out, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. The morning light touched her face, soft but pale. She looked fragile, like porcelain that had survived being dropped too many times. "Did you sleep?" Crow asked without turning. She shook her head. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face." He nodded slowly, understanding more than he said. Fear has a way of replaying itself. She studied him. "You sound like someone who's lived it." Crow gave a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Everyone in my crew has ghosts. We just learn to ride faster than they can follow." She almost smiled, but then her voice softened. "Crow, thank you for last night. You didn't have to do any of that." He finally turned to face her. "We did, because we've seen too many people pretend they didn't hear the screams." For a moment, they just stood there. the quiet between them heavy but not uncomfortable. Inside, Diesel was packing gear. Jax cleaned a gun methodically, and Finn was sketching something in a notebook, eyes half awake. When Lena stepped back in, Finn looked up. "Morning," he said with a sleepy grin. "Coffee's still hot if you can call it that." "Thanks," she murmured. Jax looked toward Crow. "So what's the plan? We talkin' her to the sheriff's station." "Yeah," Crow said. "We get her to Rick in Clearview. He'll make sure she's protected. Then we're out." Finn frowned. "You think Eric's gonna just let her go?" The guy looked like a storm waiting to break. "He'll try something," Diesel grunted. "They always do." Crow's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll finish it fast if he does." Lena flinched at those words, "finish it fast." It echoed somewhere inside her. By 8:30 a.m. they were back on the road. The sun had broken through, turning wet asphalt into a silver ribbon stretching through the hills. Lena rode with Crow again, clutching his jacket tightly. Her face pressed against his back to block the wind. Every mile that passed felt like peeling away another layer of fear. But just as they crossed the county line, Crow noticed something in his mirror. A black SUV, too clean, too steady, following far behind. He didn't say anything yet. He just rode harder. At the next gas stop, he finally mentioned it. "Someone's on our tail," he said quietly to Diesel. "You sure?" "Been there since mile marker 62. Never passed us, never fell back." Diesel's expression hardened. "Eric." "Could be." They refueled quickly, Lena waiting near the restroom, unaware of the conversation. Crow's instincts, honed from years of running outlaw routes and surviving ambushes, were rarely wrong. He could feel the weight of danger long before it showed its face. And he felt it now. 20 minutes later, the road narrowed between two cliffs. The SUV picked up speed. Crow's eyes flicked to his mirror again, too close now. Then the first gunshot cracked through the air. Lena screamed, ducking instinctively as the sound echoed. A bullet tore through the side mirror of Diesel's bike, sending shards flying. "Move," Crow shouted. The bikers split formation instantly, riding in tight arcs as bullets hit the pavement around them. The SUV tried to ram Diesel, but he veered off just in time, gravel spraying into the air. Finn pulled out his sidearm and fired back at the tires, his shots sharp and controlled. One tire blew, sending sparks across the asphalt. The SUV swerved, lost control, and slammed into a ditch, smoke rising from the hood. The bikers slowed down, circling back cautiously. Crow dismounted first, gun drawn. He approached the vehicle, motioning the others to stay alert. When he yanked open the driver's door, his jaw tightened. It was Eric. It was a man in tactical gear. No badge, no ID, just a black vest and cold eyes. Crow's voice went low. "Who sent you?" The man coughed, blood on his lip. "You shouldn't have taken her." Lena approached slowly, trembling. "What? Who are you talking about?" The man's head tilted toward her. "Your husband's not the only one looking, sweetheart." Then he collapsed unconscious. Crow's eyes met Jax's. "Get his phone." Finn searched the vehicle, finding a second gun and a folder in the back seat. Inside were photos of Lena, the diner, and even Crow's bike. Every angle, every timestamp from last night. Lena's hand covered her mouth. "What is this?" Crow flipped through the pages. "It's a file, someone tracking you, not just your husband." "But who?" she whispered. Before Crow could answer, Diesel's voice came from behind. "Guys, this ain't just one SUV." They turned. Down the road, another pair of vehicles appeared on the horizon. "Let's go," Crow barked. They mounted up, the engines roaring again. The chase resumed. They rode for nearly an hour before finally losing pursuit in the old industrial sector on the edge of Clearview. The factories here had been shut for years, just skeletons of rust and broken glass. Crow led them into an abandoned warehouse, sliding the metal door shut behind them. Lena was shaking when she got off the bike. I don't understand. Who would do this? Crow ran a hand through his hair, packing. Tell me everything you know about your husband's work. He's an accountant, she said slowly. At least that's what he always said. Diesel gave a low whistle. Accountants don't send hitmen. Crow looked at her carefully. Think hard, Lena. Has he ever taken you anywhere unusual, met people you didn't know? She tried to remember, then her eyes widened. He used to get these phone calls, always stepped outside to take them, said it was clients from overseas. Once I saw a name flash on his phone, M. Draven. When I asked, he said it was business. Crow froze. That name meant something. Jax noticed. You know him. Crow's voice dropped. Yeah, Draven runs shipments out of the Gulf, not legal ones. He's a trafficker. Lena's breath caught. You're saying Eric worked for them? Crow nodded grimly. Looks that way. He probably kept you close because you knew too much or because he thought he owned you. She stepped back, tears rising. Oh my God. Finn kicked a loose can across the floor. So what now? We can't go to the sheriff if Draven's involved. Half the force in Clearview's bought. Crow rubbed his temples. He hated this part, the crossroads between justice and survival. We keep moving, he decided. North toward the hills. I've got a safe house up there. We'll figure it out from there. Lena looked exhausted, broken between fear and disbelief. But when Crow met her eyes, she saw something steady there, like a promise that he wouldn't let her disappear. Okay, she whispered. Night fell again by the time they reached the hills. The safe house wasn't much, a cabin buried deep in the woods, accessible only by dirt road. But it was hidden, quiet, and for now safe. Inside, Diesel started a fire while Jax rigged motion sensors near the windows. Finn was working on the SUV's phone trying to crack its lock. Whoever these guys are, he muttered, they've got encrypted comms, military-level stuff. Crow sat by the window, watching the trees. The silence between gusts of wind felt unnatural, too still. Lena approached him carefully. You've been quiet. He nodded, thinking. About what? He looked at her, his expression softer now. About how far this goes, about what happens if I can't stop it. She shook her head. You've already done more than anyone else ever has. Crow gave a humorless chuckle. You don't know me that well yet. She tilted her head. Then tell me. He sighed, leaning back. Used to run a chapter of the Reapers. We weren't exactly the good kind of bikers back then. I got out when my brother didn't make it through a job gone wrong. Since then, I've tried to make up for the things I can't undo. Lena's eyes softened. That's why you helped me. Maybe, he said quietly. Or maybe I just saw someone who reminded me of someone I couldn't save. The silence that followed was heavy, but not awkward. Two broken people sharing the same firelight, trying to survive the same darkness. Then from the far corner, Finn's voice broke the calm. Got it. Everyone turned. He'd unlocked the phone. On the screen was a series of messages between unknown numbers. The last one read, Target still with the biker crew. Orders are unchanged. Terminate before sunrise. Lena's blood ran cold. Crow stood up. Pack it up, we're leaving. Diesel frowned. You said this place was off map. It is, Crow growled. Which means whoever's after her isn't tracking us by route. They're tracking her. Lena froze. Tracking me how? Crow's eyes went to her jacket. When's the last time you saw Eric before the diner? Yesterday morning, she said slowly. He hugged me before he left for work. Check her clothes, Crow ordered. Diesel ran a metal detector wand over her jacket and found it, barely visible, stitched inside the lining. A microchip no bigger than a grain of rice. Son of a, Diesel muttered. Crow grabbed it, crushed it between his fingers, and tossed it into the fire. Too late, Jax said grimly. If they had a signal, they already know we're here. Crow turned to Lena. We'll end this before they do. She swallowed, her voice shaking. How? He met her eyes, steady and unreadable. We draw them out. They prepared through the night. Diesel and Jax positioned the bikes strategically around the property. Finn rigged flares and oil traps near the entrance road. Lena sat quietly near the fire, watching Crow clean his weapon, the metallic clicks rhythmic and calm. I don't want anyone hurt because of me, she whispered finally. Crow didn't look up. That's not your choice anymore. You didn't bring this storm, you're just standing in it. She wanted to argue but couldn't. Her hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from a kind of adrenaline she hadn't felt before, defiance. At 2:14 a.m., the first headlights appeared through the trees. Crow stood slowly, showtime. 3 SUVs approached, moving slow and deliberate. Diesel whispered, they brought company. Crow gave the signal. Finn hit the switch, flares burst to life across the hill, lighting the forest in crimson. Gunfire erupted instantly. The bikers returned fire with precision, not chaos. Years of experience turned them into moving shadows, hitting tires, engines, and lights. Lena ducked behind a crate, covering her ears, her heart pounding. One SUV exploded when a bullet ignited the oil trap. Another swerved and crashed into a tree. The third kept coming. Crow stepped into its path, firing round after round until the windshield shattered. When the driver slumped forward, the vehicle rolled to a stop. But from the passenger side, another man climbed out, tall, furious, eyes burning. Eric. He wasn't supposed to be there. He pointed his gun straight at Crow. You should have stayed out of this. Before Crow could move, Lena screamed, Eric, stop, and stepped out from cover. He froze, lowering the weapon slightly. Lena, you don't understand. They're using you to get to me. Crow shouted, don't listen to him. Eric took a step forward, desperation cutting through his anger. They killed Draven last week. Now they want me dead, and they'll take you to make sure I don't talk. Lena's mind spun. What are you talking about? Eric's eyes flicked toward Crow. Ask him what he was before he started playing savior. Crow's expression darkened. Don't. Eric smirked bitterly. Tell her how you used to run Draven's shipments before you grew a conscience. You think you're saving her. You're just cleaning up your own mess. Lena's breath caught. Is that true? Crow hesitated, and that single heartbeat of silence told her everything. Eric raised his gun again. End it fast, he said coldly. And that's when Lena whispered the same words, broken but strong. End it fast. Crow turned his head sharply at her voice. Then Diesel moved, one shot clean, final. Eric fell. The forest went quiet again, except for the rain beginning to fall once more. Lena stood frozen, her voice barely a whisper. He was right, wasn't he? Crow holstered his gun, his face unreadable. He was half right. I used to run for Draven, but I got out before the blood money came due. She stared at him. So what does that make you now? Crow met her eyes, voice low. Someone trying to do one thing right before the world buries him. The silence stretched. Then slowly she took a step toward him. Her hands trembled as she reached up, touched his chest, then hesitated. He caught her hand gently, stopping her. Lena. She shook her head. Don't. And then, as if compelled by some strange pull, she whispered again, barely audible, the same words that had hung between them since that first night. End it fast. Crow frowned. What do you mean? She looked up at him, her eyes suddenly filled with tears and something darker. Because you don't understand. I wasn't supposed to survive tonight. Crow froze. What? Lena's lips trembled. He put something in the car before we left, said it was for protection, I think. The explosion cut her off. A fireball tore through the hillside, throwing them both to the ground. The SUV Eric had arrived in was engulfed in flames, and the shockwave sent shards of glass raining down around them. When the smoke cleared, Lena was on the ground, blood streaking down her arm. Crow crawled toward her, grabbing her shoulders. "Stay with me." Her eyes fluttered, her voice weak. "He said if he couldn't have me, no one could." Crow's heart pounded. He lifted her into his arms as Finn and Diesel rushed over. "We need to get her out," Diesel shouted. But as they ran toward the bikes, the forest behind them erupted with new headlights. More engines, more men. Lena's breathing was shallow. "Crow," she whispered, "promise me." "What?" Her eyes locked on his. "Don't let me die scared." Crow's jaw clenched. "You're not dying, not tonight." But deep down, he wasn't sure he could keep that promise. Because the men closing in weren't just Eric's allies. They were Draven's, coming to finish what the fire had started. And before the night was over, Crow would finally learn what Lena's whisper really meant. The forest was burning behind them. Flames licked the black sky, sending ash spiraling upward like ghostly snow. The roar of engines echoed again, dozens of them. Not bikes this time. Trucks. Heavy, armored, deliberate. Crow held Lena against his chest as the others scrambled for cover. Her skin was pale, her breath shallow, but her eyes were still open. "Stay with me, Lena," he whispered. She tried to smile. "You always say that." "Because you always listen," he said softly, brushing hair from her face. Diesel crouched near them, scanning the road. "There's too many. We can't hold this spot." Jax checked his ammo. "We're outnumbered 10-1. You got a plan, boss?" Crow didn't answer immediately. He was staring at Lena, then at the trucks cresting the ridge. "I do," he said finally, "but you're not gonna like it." He lifted Lena gently, setting her down behind a fallen log. "Stay here. No matter what happens, don't move." She caught his hand weakly. "Crow." He turned back. "Yeah." Her voice cracked. "You already saved me once. Don't make me watch you die." He hesitated, then squeezed her hand. "Not planning to." Then he stood, his boots crunching on gravel as he stepped into the open road. The truck stopped about 50 yards away. Men poured out, dressed in tactical black, rifles raised. They formed a semicircle, their leader stepping forward, a tall man in a long gray coat, his face shadowed by the firelight. Crow recognized him instantly. "Draven." The man smiled coldly. "So the ghost still breathes." Crow's voice was steady. "You sent killers after a woman who wanted out." Draven shrugged. "Collateral, she knew names she shouldn't, places, codes, and you, Crow, you knew better than to touch what's mine." "She's not yours." "She was his," Draven corrected, "and he was mine. That makes her part of my equation." Crow's jaw tightened. "You always did talk like business was religion." "Because it is." The men behind Draven raised their weapons. Crow spread his hands slightly. "You don't want to do this." "Oh, I do," Draven said calmly. "You ran from me, took my contacts, cost me millions. You think hiding behind a girl's pain makes you righteous." Crow said nothing. His silence was louder than anger. Draven tilted his head. "I could kill you now, but I'd rather make you watch." That's when Diesel's voice boomed from the trees. "Bad idea." Gunfire erupted again, breaking the standoff. Jax and Finn appeared from opposite sides, unleashing hell from cover. Draven's men scrambled, returning fire. Crow ducked behind a rock, bullets ricocheting around him. "Lena," he shouted, "stay down." She tried, but one of Draven's men flanked left, spotting her through the smoke. Crow saw him aim. He ran, no hesitation, no thought, just pure instinct. He dove, catching the bullet meant for her shoulder. The impact spun him, but he stayed up, blood soaking his side. "Crow," she screamed. He grabbed her arm. "We need to move now." Diesel roared up on his bike, sliding sideways through the dirt. "Get her on." Crow lifted Lena, setting her behind Diesel. Take her out of here. Go north, follow the ridge until you hit the river. Don't stop. Diesel's eyes widened. What about you? Crow chambered another round. I'm staying. No way, boss. Do it. Diesel hesitated, then saw the look in Crow's eyes, the look that said goodbye. He revved the bike and took off, Lena screaming his name until the sound vanished into the trees. Crow turned back to the battlefield. Jax and Finn were